So we already talked a little bit about Cuba with the beginning and the emergence of the Cold War. And so Cuba in the 1950s was very dependent on the United States. In fact, about three-fourths of all of their imports came from the United States. And then on the flip side, the United States bought a lot of their sugar exports. And the Batista government that was in control at the time was a very unpopular dictator. And he had come to power promising land reform and full employment and all these benefits for the lower classes. But many of those benefits never actually came to fruition. And so, even though this dictator was corrupt and not very popular, the United States continued to have a good relationship with him, basically because he wasn't communist. And so it's into that situation that Fidel Castro rose to power. And Fidel Castro in 1953 tries to seize power in Cuba. He fails and he's exiled to Mexico. And while in exile, he actually continues to build up his followers. And one of the kind of key people to help Castro was Che Guevara. And Che Guevara was a huge revolutionary from Argentina and helped lead revolutions in Cuba. And after helping Castro successfully lead this revolution in Cuba, he helped several other nations, including Bolivia. None of his later revolutions were as successful as the revolution in Cuba, and ultimately he would be killed in 1967 during a revolution in Bolivia. But he was a very influential revolutionary throughout several parts of Latin America. So he helps Fidel Castro build up a stronger military and continue to build up support. And then Castro returns back to Cuba and overthrows this dictator Batista. And so in the midst of the Cold War, you have the Bay of Pigs fiasco where the United States comes in and tries to overthrow Fidel Castro. Ultimately, they fail to do so. And this kind of pushed Castro closer in their relationship with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union steps in and kind of supports Castro. And then that leads to the outbreak of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Soviet missiles are discovered in Cuba. The United States responds by setting up a blockade around Cuba. And again, that's the closest we came to direct war with the Soviets throughout the entire Cold War. But in the end, the Soviets step down. They agree to remove the missiles, and the United States agrees not to overthrow Fidel Castro. When we look at Castro's success in Cuba, he had some successes. The education system was greatly improved. The overall healthcare system of Cuba was improved. Housing was also improved. But one of their biggest failures was to successfully transform the economy. Even after his socialist takeover, the economy remained extremely weak. It was still heavily dependent on sugar exports. Now, instead of those sugar exports going to the United States, they were going to the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union did a lot to basically prop up the Cuban economy, and the lack of any kind of industrialization. They failed to develop their own factories and their own industries. So those are the biggest failures of the communist regime in Cuba.